sense of the community is probably one of the most important things in life.
There's really nothing else you can do besides stand here and salute him.
We should also ban assault weapons in the process.
You don't stop drunk drivers by getting rid of all sober drivers.
The border is secure. The border is closed.
Guys, hey, there's actually some people that cross the border over here.
Do you have plans to visit the border?
Not today.
Yeah, when I'm talking to the TV camera, I'm not going to wear a mask.
It'd make us feel better.
You're welcome to step away if you like.
200 million shots in 100 days.
90% of what's happening now is the plan that we had.
This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
He doesn't deserve to be our leader anymore.
I haven't been invited to the White House so far this administration.
It's one of the most despicable things I have seen.
I never thought that Biden in a million years would be worse than this. This is Bernie Sanders on steroids.
My predecessor. Oh, God, I miss him.
She was like Bret Baier in a tiara, and she's 20 years older than Biden.
Bret Baier, the tiara, is just lingering in my... I can't do the rest of the show, actually. I'm bowing out.
Neither can I. Thanks for inviting us into your home tonight. That's it for this special report. Fair, balanced, and unafraid. Fox News Primetime, hosted by Brian Kilmeade, starts right now. Brian, make it a great weekend.
I'm going to try. Brett, I'm going to be monitoring your weekend and make sure you somehow are playing golf. Can you make that happen for me?
I can, sir. I can.
All right. Good job, Brett. Thanks so much. Meanwhile, good evening to you. It is now time for Fox News Primetime. As Brett gave it away, I am Brian Kilmeade. All right, we got a big show for you tonight. You want some proof? Here we go. America's former top health official, finally free to speak his mind, says he believes that killer virus came from a Wuhan lab, not a wet market bat. Plus, all eyes on the final frontier. Why China is determined to muscle us out of the moon and Mars and make American life on Earth hell. And the latest in the scandal with Hunter Biden and his saga. Where did his gun go, and how did he get it in the first place? But we start tonight with two bills that will affect the way Americans vote. One just passed in Georgia, and the other is kicking around in the Senate after passing in the House. President Joe Biden's blasting Georgia's new election legislation, signed into law by Governor Brian Kemp last night.
It's an atrocity. The idea, if you want any indication that it has nothing to do with fairness, nothing to do with decency, they passed a law saying you can't provide water for people standing in line while they're waiting to vote. You don't need anything else to know that this is nothing but punitive, designed to keep people from voting. You can't provide water for people about to vote. Give me a break.
We're going to go over this, but poll workers can provide water, just not Democrats or Republicans. Meanwhile, he called it an atrocity through his mask. He said it was indecent. Yesterday, he called the bill Jim Eagle because Jim Crow, I guess, wasn't big enough. We're trying to figure this out all day. Democrats have hammered the bill and called it racist, saying it makes it harder for people of color to vote. Let's look at what it actually does. Now, keep in mind, it's 886 pages, but it expands early voting in most counties, adding Saturday and Sunday as options. It makes secure drop boxes part of state law in every single county, 159 in all. It prohibits anyone but poll workers from handing out water or food to people waiting in line. Imagine the horror. It creates a voter fraud line and strengthens ID requirements for absentee votings. You know what? I don't think Joe Biden went far enough. This isn't Jim Crow. This isn't Jim Eagle. Follow me here. It's Jim Condor. Democrats hate voter ID laws. They hate it. They say that it's racist to ask for identification before you vote. But remember, Californians needed to show ID before they signed Gavin Newsom's recall petition. Is that racist? Stacey Abrams, who still has not conceded her loss to Governor Brian Kemp back in 2018, called the bill's passage a rush job coordinated by Republicans to avoid scrutiny. She tweeted this. Now, pay attention. What's likely to come from SB 202, that's what it's called, quick passage by the Georgia Senate, and a speedy signature by Kemp. Why? To avoid actual analysis and public awareness of how SB 202 hurts voters of color. Really. Her point is they don't want you, the voter, to look too closely at the bill. Otherwise, you'll want to hold the people who wrote it accountable. Hold that thought. That brings us to our next bill. Now, this one, which I should have said before, is 886 pages. It's called the For the People Act. Now, hold on tight. It's passed by the House in the middle of the night. when all were sleeping. No one told Stacey Abrams that. It would create a nationwide universal mail-in voting system. This is a little different, allowing every voter to cast their ballot in the mail without identification. Man, that's a change. It would overrule the states on ballot harvesting and make same-day registration legal nationwide. We're trying to get rid of ballot harvesting, I thought. It would allow felons to vote. That's good news for jumpsuit wearers. And don't forget a 6-to-1 fundraising match using taxpayer money. I'm so glad I'm going to get rid of all that excess income. The Democrats are furious about Georgia's voting law. They say it's Republican. It's a Republican power grab. But they have no problem with Nancy Pelosi doing the same thing with H.R. 1. How does this make sense? So let's get this straight. If you support voter ID laws, you're a racist. If you stand against Pelosi's power grab, you're a racist. And if you don't think the filibuster is racist, you're a racist, just like Senators Barack Obama and Joe Biden.
At its core, the filibuster is not about stopping a nominee or a bill. It's about compromise and moderation. That's why the founders put unlimited debate in.
What they don't expect is for one party, be it Republican or Democrat, to change the rules in the middle of the game so that they can make all the decisions while the other party is told to sit down and keep quiet.
He didn't know we had our VCR rolling. A final point on the filibuster. For all the talk by Democrats that it's a relic of Jim Crow designed to hurt the interests of black people, why did Democrats use it to kill Tim Scott's police reform bill this summer?
Today, I lost a vote on a piece of legislation that would have led to systemic change in the relationship between the communities of color and the law enforcement community. We would have broken this concept in this nation that somehow, some way, you have to either be for law enforcement or for communities of color. And my friends on the other side just said no. Not no to the legislation. They just said no.
They didn't read it. Filibuster, remember that? The author of that bill, Senator Tim Scott, promised to come on Friday, and believe it or not, Senator, it is Friday already. You remember that moment?
I do. It was a frustrating, irritating moment where the Democrats used a filibuster to block police reform that would have positively impacted disproportionately African-American communities. Here's what we know about the Democrats. They were for the filibuster before they were against the filibuster. I keep asking myself, will the real Chuck Schumer please stand up? Is it the one who was for the filibuster, or is it the new one who's now against the filibuster? You did a great job, Brian, bringing to the surface President Obama and now President Biden's comments about their support of the filibuster. But now, of course, they use the word racist whenever they're trying to scare people into their corner. It has nothing to do with race, but they don't care. Winning at all cost means losing at some point.
But you know, to most of America, you say racist, it freezes people, not you. Someone who grew up in a working class, poor community, who worked his way up as an African American. But for the average American who is not involved in the political process, say you call them a racist, you could ruin their life. And that's what they hope to do. I went back to the play-by-play of your bill. And you got Manchin, Doug Jones, and Angus King to vote for it. And you told Cory Booker and Senator Kamala Harris, I'll give you 10 amendments. Look at the bill. I just want you aboard. And Chuck Schumer wouldn't let them. That is a problem with the filibuster. That's abusing it. You wrote something to pass, and they refused to make that happen. And that's the problem.
Exactly, Brian. I offered them 10 amendments to start. Then I went to 20, and then I said a wraparound amendment. They literally did not want the American people to see the police reform bill called the Justice Act. Why? Because we treated officers with respect, and at the same time we were improving the relationship between law enforcement officers and communities of color, because it's not a binary choice. You can actually improve the quality of life for minorities at the same time protecting our law enforcement officers. What the Democrats want to do right now is to divide and conquer.
Absolutely. So let's move on and let's talk about these two bills.
Yes.
Elizabeth Warren just tweeted this out after the Georgia voting bill got passed and signed. Here it is. The Republicans who's sitting in Stacey Abrams' chair. So she's not saying election should be accepted, right? So she's saying election shouldn't be challenged. Just signed a despicable voter suppression bill into law to take Georgia back to Jim Crow. The Senate must pass the hashtag For the People Act and John Lewis Voting Rights Act immediately, or democracy is at stake. Is that a go sign? Didn't they accuse Donald Trump of using similar language and causing an insurrection January 6th? What is she thinking? Why did Twitter leave that up?
You know, it's a double standard even in it's one of the reasons why we need to reform Section 230 as it relates to our social platforms. But the truth of the matter is what she's really doing, and they do such a good job, they make sure that we don't focus on the main thing. The main thing is how awful their HR1 or S1 is. Brian, they're going to force taxpayers to give money to individual campaign accounts for people running for Congress. They're going to eliminate all voter ID laws. They are going to allow for ballot harvesting, as you said at the beginning of the program, to become the law of the land. These should all say fraud alert, fraud alert, fraud alert, because every single part of HR1 is designed to maintain power at all costs, including even if they have to do things that are unethical.
As I mentioned, it's 886 pages. It requires states to redraw districts that favor Democrats. It would ban voter ID requirements. That means they're also going to give everybody a ballot across the country. To me, they also are going to say entertain legislation to make D.C. a 51st state. This is not even going to stand up the constitutional test if it gets there. But if they throw out the filibuster, they're going to tell 50 states, we now control voting. The problem is, if you go to Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, says state legislatures have the power to determine how a president is chosen. How do they get past that?
Well, they don't. That's the good news. Thank God that President Trump had 3 noms go on the Supreme Court, because the truth is we are going to need the Supreme Court to maintain the conservative balance in this country, not because they're conservatives, but because they are textualists. They want to read what the Constitution says and follows it. That is a beauty of our amazing democracy, is that we have a Supreme Court that will actually vote consistent with our founders' intention as it relates to the election process in our nation. We must protect it. We must protect it.
Senator, I know you were on the ground trying to get those seats in Georgia to be Republican, and it was unsuccessful, and the president lost by 12,000. They are terrible communicators, because there's nothing racist about this bill, but they haven't gone out of their way to define it. And the governor, Kemp, might have good ideas, but he keeps them hidden in his head. He says, I just want to be able to show proof, a driver's license and a social security number for an absentee ballot. I don't want to deny you. I also said, you can get water and food. I don't want Democrats or Republicans feeding you to sway the voter. And I want to abolish no excuse absentee voting, because that was a pandemic. It was a one-time thing.
Yes, Brian, you hit the nail on the head. What we have to do a better job of is marketing the common sense that we embed in our legislation. Look, you don't want a Republican or a Democrat providing anything to a voter standing in line. You want the workers to do it because they're nonpartisan at the time they're serving. We want to make sure that every single person can vote. We just want to make sure that it's you voting. That's why the voter ID laws around this country have been helpful. And frankly, I remember a story that said that in North Carolina, with the voter ID, African-American voter turnout went up, not down. So if you want to look at whether or not things have an impact, let's study the numbers. They're not studying the numbers. They are literally on the prowl for a liberal takeover of everything, and then codifying it permanently by bringing in new states that have an overwhelming Democrat approach to governing.
And just so you know, Virginia and New Jersey, those Republican bastions, they ask for your last 4 digits of a Social Security number, and they want a picture ID. Come on, please. Enough with the racist. Absolutely. Senator, keep fighting. Thanks so much for starting your weekend with us.
Thank you, Brian.
You got it. Meanwhile, straight ahead, Kayleigh McEnany is here with the latest on the Hunter Biden saga. Yes, there's another chapter. Plus, how Mitt Romney is being honored by the Kennedy family. Receive the hour. Welcome back, everybody. Before I read this intro, do you think I get us a little bit of music? Just bring it down a little. Bring it down. For decades, the prestigious John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award has been given to the likes of Senator John McCain, war hero, Congressman John Lewis, a legendary American civil rights activist, to the peacemakers of Northern Ireland. They came together and agreed to stop fighting. And the selfless public servants who responded on 9/11 right in this city will never forget. So, it should be no surprise this year that the JFK Library Foundation is choosing to award Senator Mitt Romney. Why? For being the only Republican senator to vote to impeach President Trump in his first impeachment trial. Yes, Such courage, such bravery. A Nobel Prize is probably just around the corner and probably an early wake-up call. Joining me now to put this all in perspective, former Trump White House press secretary and Fox News analyst now, Kayleigh McEnany. Kayleigh, welcome to the
Thank you, Brian.
to Fox. Were you surprised? Because officially, this is the first time I think we're interacting as a Fox News contributor again. But are you surprised that he got this?
Yeah, a little. I mean, it was much like President Obama receiving the Nobel Peace Prize before he even took office, a bit bewildering. The music intro was very appropriate, Brian. Well done. But, you know, this is so curious. You know, profile and courage? No, profile and courage is standing up to China, which is what President Trump did, getting out of the Paris Climate Accord with the entire world against you, as President Trump did, forcing Mexico to the table, as President Trump did, and standing against really the entirety of the GOP establishment, which President Trump did in 2016, and former candidate nominee Mitt Romney never did. So a bit peculiar, I would say.
I would say so, too. Quick thing of a Hunter Biden story. This is really surprising. It turns out his former sister-in-law, who became his girlfriend, then they broke up. They had an incident, at which time she went out, who is the widow of Beau Biden, took his gun and threw it in the supermarket garbage. At which time he told her, and she said, go back and get the gun. It was gone. They went to the supermarket, who called the cops because they want to make sure that gun wasn't involved in some type of crime. It would have tracked back to Hunter Biden. They go to the, it ends up fast forward to the gun store, where somehow the Secret Service is there and told the gun owner to give me the paperwork, so they were going to take it so it wouldn't track back to Hunter. It's hard to know what bothers you most about this story, but can I ask you to make that decision?
Yeah, this is bizarre on so many levels. Also, Brian, the FBI was reportedly there, which is incredibly peculiar. The FBI would be there. We know they were investigating Hunter for something unrelated, of course, his taxes and potential money laundering. Secret Service, you mentioned, extremely bizarre. They would be there because, of course, Vice President Biden's kids would not have had a Secret Service detail at that point. So the fact that they would be involved at all is strange and odd. Nevertheless, actually going to the gun store and trying to get the paperwork. But you know, to me, Brian, you know, I read this story, and it's one in a series about Hunter Biden, and I just have to wonder, you know, the press never covered this, and they meddled in the election by never covering it. And Jack Dorsey, who pathetically said this week, I regret censoring the New York Post story. He censored them for 2 weeks, and he called it an error. He censored me as the president's press secretary in my personal capacity when I tweeted this, blocked me from Twitter. It's too little, too late to just say I apologize.
And the next chapter in that is, how did he get a license? Because they ask you, you're addicted to any drugs. He got kicked out of the military because he tested positive for cocaine. So there's a lot of issues there that, as usual, are unexplored. I want to bring you to this exchange today as a press conference at the White House, as Peter Doocy, who is only member of the pool not to get a question, not to make the list for Joe Biden's first press conference yesterday. Tell me what you think of this exchange.
Fox is the only member of the 5-network TV pool that has never been on the list in front of the president. And I'm just curious if that is an official administration policy.
We're here having a conversation, aren't we?
Yes, but
and do I take questions from you every time you come to the briefing room?
Yes, but
has the president taken questions from you since you came in? He came into office?
Unfortunately,
yes or no?
Only when I have shouted after he goes through his whole list.
Was Peter right to say it? What do you think of Jen Psaki's reaction and the ultimate decision to not put Peter on the list?
Oh, he was right to say it. And let's be real. President Biden cannot handle Peter Doocy at all. President Trump, by contrast, the first person he would call on was oftentimes Jim Acosta or CNN, MSNBC, or NBC, I should say. He would call on the hostile networks first. Peter Doocy, by contrast, isn't a hostile network. He's just someone who asks good, probing questions, which President Biden can't handle.
And Kayleigh, you know what I like most about it? It's polite. It's polite to the press secretary. It's polite to the president. They're just direct, and they're very different from his colleagues. Kayleigh, always great to see you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
You got it. Meanwhile, coming up straight ahead, a lot more show. We're going to head live to the border and talk exclusively with a reporter who just toured the Biden administration's crowded juvenile migrant facility over in Donna, Texas. You're not going to believe some of the pictures. Plus, we're with a group of GOP senators who went there last night and today. An inside look at what they saw. Border crisis goes unchecked, and access to the migrant processing centers remains limited. A group of Republican senators touring the southern border yesterday and today Well, afterwards, they came out swinging against the Biden administration's handling of the ongoing immigration crisis.
Joe Biden, the president, made the problem worse yesterday. This was a nightmare press conference. He told everybody, don't worry, we got crowded facilities.
Either President Biden believes in open borders, or the people that President Biden has put in charge to make border security policy are not qualified to manage a food truck.
We just saw a dead body floating on the Rio Grande, coming by of someone who died, crossing, no doubt, with a trafficker. This is inhumane.
And you're going to see some of the pictures that they were able to get out and get, and it's pretty unbelievable the way people are packed in. What I'm missing is Democratic outrage. The Daily Caller's Richie McGinnis, a reporter out there now on the border, joins us. Richie, you've been there for a few days. Orientate me where you are right now. Where's Mexico? Where's the U.S.?
I'm just a couple of miles from the Mexican border. I'm actually at an undisclosed private property near McAllen, Texas. And Mexico is just about 2 miles that way, and the United States is obviously right where I'm sitting and off to my right as well.
What did you see over the last couple of days? What just happened before you came on with us?
In literally the last hour, we had 100 migrants come through the exact spot where I'm sitting right now in groups of about, first it was 2 groups of about 15, and then about 70 people just rolled up all at once. And it was pretty staggering to see, them all traveling together. And when we presented them with water, to see how thirsty everybody was, including all the very small children, it was pretty shocking.
So you saw families. They say 80% are young men. You didn't. How would you describe this group?
This group that we saw today was mostly young children, women, and teenage boys. I didn't see a single adult male actually in this particular group. 2 nights ago, I was also on a public road near McAllen, Texas, and we saw about 300 night. And again, same situation, only just a handful of adult males.
Yeah, I mean, we're breaking up a little with the signal, but this is worth it. You're in the middle of really nowhere. What is also important to point out, they're not looking to avoid you. They're looking to get processed, and they're so overwhelmed. Now I understand they're not getting processed. They come in, they don't even get a ticket to come back and appear in court. Are you hearing that?
Well, every single group that we've encountered, if law enforcement isn't directly within eyesight, they're asking us how they can find the Inmigración. So basically, we're actually helping them to find authorities. That's their goal, is to find the authorities so that they can start the process.
That's a reporter getting the story, not waiting for the story. Richie, thanks so much. Appreciate it. All right, meanwhile, now to a new revelation about the possible origin of the coronavirus. Former CDC Director Robert Redfield, remember him? Telling CNN he believes this virus escaped from a lab in China.
Still think the most likely etiology of this pathogen in Wuhan was from a laboratory, escaped. Other people don't believe that. That's fine. Science will eventually figure it out. It's not unusual for respiratory pathogens that are being worked on in a laboratory to infect a laboratory worker.
He says usually, he goes on to say, it takes a while for it to figure out how to become more and more efficient in human-to-human transmissions. He doesn't think it came from a bat. Joining us now is General Jack Keane. General, I've heard that we have had access to that Wuhan lab. If this is in fact true, would it surprise you?
No, not whatsoever. I mean, we have had the Trump administration for some time, and particularly Secretary Pompeo, conveying to the American public that the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming, that likely the originator of the so-called coronavirus originated in a Wuhan laboratory. And the Wuhan laboratory is one of 75, but we know that what takes place in that laboratory is also the development of biotechnical weapons and also the potential from animal to human transfer of viruses. So certainly what the evidence is supporting is that some kind of accident took place there in a transfer to likely a human being working in that laboratory. And people have been speculating about that for some time. Right. And now we have someone in the scientific community who has also seen this evidence, who has come to the same conclusion. And I accept that conclusion on the face of it, given who he is and what he represents.
It's also inexcusable that we still don't know. A year later, they poisoned the world. Millions have died, 500,000 in America plus alone, and we still don't know. General, let's talk about the relationship now with us and China with this new administration. Essentially, the president told us last night our relations and our policy with China failed over the last 4 years. Would you characterize it the same way?
No, none whatsoever. I mean, I do agree with the Biden administration taking a tough stand on China, similar to the Trump administration, and actually adopting pretty much most of the policies. The only thing that they haven't done is call out China, for COVID-19, for the origination and the lack of deception in terms of that origination and also the spread of it. But in terms of the trade deal, tariffs, export restrictions, sanctions, calling out the China for their certainly crushing the democracy in Hong Kong, the intimidation and coercion of Taiwan and all our other allies in the region, expansion, South China Sea, cyber warfare. They've gone right down the line of the Trump administration. And to say that the Trump administration has had no impact makes no sense whatsoever. Actually, President Trump revitalized the Quad Alliance, which is Japan, the United States, Australia, and India, an alliance that lay dormant all during the Obama administration that was originated by George Bush, and the purpose of it was stability and security in the region because of China's behavior. And Biden is using that Quad Alliance now as his anchor point from which to reach the other allies in the region. So I believe they're in step. Here's my caution, Brian, to our audience. There's a lot of rhetoric here. We have to see policy formulation, and we have to see a willingness to stand up against China and confront them, not just compete with them. And that's the words that President Biden is using, compete. They need to be confronted because of their malign and aggressive behavior. It remains to be seen if they have the mental toughness and resolve to do that. I hope they do. They are moving in the right direction. We will see what actually happens because they will be tested.
General, if they cut the defense budget, that's going to show weakness. I also think it's important to point out we invited them here, along with Vladimir Putin, to talk climate change. Would that be the first invitation you give to China?
No, I wouldn't, but I certainly understand this is a priority in the Biden administration, and they want to cooperate first and see what comes of it. Listen, we got major issues here, and they've got to recognize that we're outgunned in the region, and we need urgent funding for the capabilities that the admirals are demanding in that region. And it has to come with a sense of urgency, and the money's got to be there.
My hope is we're not going to spend all our money on solar panels and windmills. General Jack Keane, thanks so much.
Yeah, good talking to you, Brian.
Always great to see you, and have a great weekend. Up next, an exclusive look, and get this, at the new space race now ramping up between China and the U.S. This is why you should care. It includes why Beijing is actually looking to claim territory on the dark side of the moon. We're going to talk to a former astronaut on what they're up to, as well as Florida Congressman Michael Waltz. He does it all. He's also a member of the Space Committee. This matters. Stay tuned. Don't move.
Hi, everybody. Brian Kilmeade here.
Listen to The Brian Kilmeade Show. Hear can't-miss interviews.
How this guy thinks he's going to have even a political career after this is beyond me.
And the issues that matter from a voice America trusts. The Brian Kilmeade Show. Listen anytime, anywhere at BrianKilmeadShow.com.
I have a question for you. What are you doing today to reach?
It's heating up big time. A Chinese rover recently finding a so-called milestone. We don't know what that is on the far side of the moon, the dark side. Now, will the discovery of this mysterious rock specimen, along with their presence, launch China ahead of the U.S. in the space race? They're also around Mars, allowing China to claim, actually as their own, that side of the moon. And that's not all. The Russian space agency says it will work with China on a lunar space station. Instead of our joint venture, we're working with them. We haven't worked with them since 2011 because we don't trust China. Meanwhile, Republican Congressman Michael Waltz all over this. He's a member of the Space Committee. Congressman, this is a big deal. Could they actually claim ownership of a side of the moon?
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. Look, here's the thing. China knows, the Chinese Communist Party knows, that you cannot be number one on Earth if you're number 2 in space. They are on track to pass us as the dominant space power. They launched more into space last year than the rest of the world combined, including the United States. You mentioned the agreement they have with the Russians to put a manned space station on the moon. That will have a military presence. They're looking to mine the moon. They just put up a competing GPS system. They want to pull away from ours, and they know that our entire modern economy, agriculture, just-in-time logistics, telecommunications, banking, are all now dependent on those satellites up in space. Well, they've developed the weapons to take those satellites out. In every single war game, the first shots are now fired in space because they know our military is also dependent on it. That's why the Space Force is so important, and that's why continuing the resources for what we're doing up there is so critical. The Chinese get it. I don't know that the Biden administration does.
And the NASA's got to start selling this and let this know this isn't just fun for billionaires to play in. This matters. 2011, Congress banned cooperation with China. They were stealing our technology in our joint venture and using it to further their ballistic missile technology. So we're on Mars. We landed on Mars. Now we got a chopper. We're about to see some exclusive pictures from NASA on Mars right after you're done. Why does it matter to be on Mars?
Well, it matters to be on the moon. It matters to be on Mars. You know, the Chinese know that to be considered a global superpower, again, you have to be dominant in space. The other thing that they're doing is they're putting up a competing space station. Everything that they do isn't just for finding brave new worlds. It's for a military and it's for an economic purpose. They know it. They're pouring a ton of resources in it. And again, if they pass this up in space, that is the ultimate high ground now, militarily, economically, and from a global prestige standpoint. Here's the thing, Brian. They have a heavy rocket that has multiple times has gone to the moon. They put a satellite around the moon. Our heavy rocket is now years behind and billions over budget. And look, if we look at the record of the Obama administration, they didn't replace the space shuttle. There were thousands of pink slips going out when the space shuttle program died just down the street from me here in Florida. And so far, the Biden administration has shown really no interest. In fact, his spokesman, Jen Psaki, kind of laughed and scoffed at the idea of the Space Force to protect our assets up there that we're now militarily and economically so dependent on. You know, again, it has me very worried and concerned.
Do yourself a favor, get a Democrat who understands what's at stake and sell this thing nonstop. The American people need to know it's just not about exploring. There's so much more to it. Congressman Michael Waltz, thank you.
Absolutely.
You got it. Meanwhile, the Space Coast just down the coast from him. Also joining us right now, retired NASA astronaut, International Space Station Commander Leroy Chiao. Leroy, thanks so much for joining us. Let's take a look at some images together that NASA just came out with, pictures from the rover that landed there, and the pictures that we're getting, and the type that is from Mars, looking at Earth. There's some other photos that they actually had the probe take a selfie, and they submitted to us. What is special about this module that just landed on Mars?
Perseverance is the first spacecraft that we've sent to Mars specifically to look for signs of past life on the red planet. And it's very exciting. It's got the most advanced scientific suite that we put down there. As you mentioned earlier, it's got this helicopter that's really going to be great to see. Hopefully it'll get to fly in the atmosphere down there. But specifically, Perseverance is going to be looking for those organic chemical signatures that have been trapped in the sedimentary rock and other structures, to look to see if possibly billions of years ago there was some kind of microbial life on Mars.
Right. And who's there also? United Arab Emirates is there. China is there. Where are we in terms of technology and advancement as it relates to Mars?
I think the United States, our technology is we're still the leaders in space technology and space capabilities, certainly in operations and the ability to operate spacecraft, including the International Space Station. But we can't be complacent. There is no question that we are still the leaders, but if we get complacent, we may find that one day we're not.
The goal is to be able to sustain life on Mars, so we don't have to keep going to Costco and feeding anyone that's staying at Mars, and do the same thing in the moon first. Do you believe the private sector gets us to the moon, NASA gets us to Mars?
I believe, actually, that the exciting part of the future of spaceflight, of human spaceflight especially, is the commercial side. You know, companies like SpaceX, where the founder and CEO of Elon Musk has stated since the beginning of SpaceX that his goal is to colonize Mars. In fact, he himself wants to live on Mars. You can tell a story technically how you can do that, how you could even, you know, sustainably make a colony there. But the devil's in the details, but they're making great strides. If you've been following the news and the new Starship next generation spacecraft they're developing and Falcon Super Heavy booster, pretty exciting stuff.
Will we be on the moon next November?
Next November. No, I don't think we'll put humans on the moon next November. But you know, I think I'm encouraged that the current administration is going to continue the Artemis program. But you know, of course, the dates are always in question for these kinds of things because it depends so much on funding and other political issues.
People cared when there was a competition. People should start caring now, Commander. Final thought?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen competition. You know, certainly we would not have landed on the moon in 1969 had there not been competition with the Soviet Union. Even within ourselves, you know, between the commercial side, government side, and other countries, allies that are friends of ours, the competition's good. It always gives you, keeps you strong, keeps you with making the best products at the lowest prices. Competition is always a good thing.
All right, Commander, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Leroy Cho, thank you. All right, coming up next, Carly Shimkus and Will Kane are standing by. They put their weekends on hold, tracking a number of stories, including why the BBC has many fans of the late American icon Mary Tyler Moore, who passed away 4 years ago, but they think she passed away yesterday.